Namaste. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Another thing, in response to the previous video which I made about my friend and his kind of arrogant demeanor in relation to his realization, I wanted to comment about all the people on YouTube in the New Age genre, persuasion, who are trying to tell you that you don't need books. This is such a dangerous concoction. Really, guy? Like, who goes around attacking sacred texts? Who goes around like attacking the wisdom of our first, forefathers in the ancient times? Who goes around disrespecting them in such a way as to say we don't need their books? Their books are the only thing which has preserved a connection between us and antiquity. The antiquity when all the world was one religion, when the sciences of astrology, geometry, geomancy, ritual magic, all of these kind of occult sciences were flourishing. Not only that, this is the time where they came from. This is the only reason why we know about any of these things, is because we have little bits and pieces that have survived from that age. We have the oral tradition of the Jews, which survived in the West from ancient times, which eventually became, the Torah and the, I don't want to say Talmud because Talmud's kind of crazy, but the Kabbalah, the Zohar and whatnot, the real esoteric juice of the Kabbalah, of the Judaism. And you have Hinduism, which was preserved in numerous texts. After that, it was deemed necessary to start writing it down. You see, in ancient times, there was no need for books because people had such long memories and such clear minds that they could hold all of this knowledge just from hearing it one time. So that the process was just like you have in Islam nowadays, where you have a group of people who learn to memorize the Quran from back to forward. Originally, the Quran wasn't written down; it was an oral tradition. So I'm just using it for an example, by the way, not condoning any particular religion or other, but I'm just saying that these people, in order to pass along their tradition, they have groups of people in almost every of the major cities, all the capitals of the Islamic world, who devote their lives to memorizing the Quran. I forgot the name of them, but there's some name, there's a special name for them. And so there is like the leader of them will sit and recite everything from memory to the new group. And all of the people who are under the leader, his students, sitting behind him, will correct him at the slightest mistake. So in this way, the ancient lineages of Hinduism, Judaism, even perhaps the more abstract religions like African or Scandinavian or Chinese cults, Iranian, Zoroastrianism and whatnot. Some of these more abstract cults also could have been endangered and passed down to us from this oral way. Unfortunately, as time progressed from the antediluvian periods when men were more, capable and enlightened, there became a need. There became a need to put all of this down in writing. So Srila Vedavyas, Avatar Vishnu himself, committed all of this ancient oral tradition, which was not different. In ancient times, this oral tradition was one. This one oral tradition permeated the whole world. And as it's become lost, as we enter this descending octave of Kali Yuga, it took on the different variegated forms that we find, Judaism, Hinduism, etc. But at one time, this tradition was one. And as we began to approach Kali Yuga, Vedavyas decided that, okay, so now it's time to take this tradition and put it into scriptures and arrange it into a series of 4 Vedas that would be necessary for 4 different types of men. And there would be gurus and priests and lineages assigned to extrapolate, understand, and to master each of the 4 Vedas. So that's how it began in India and also in the whole world, because as we know, even from a mainstream viewpoint, the Vedas are the oldest book in the world, the books in the world. So the oldest books in the world just happen to be the surviving linguistic tradition put down into text. Okay, so now tell me exactly what do you have against this book? The argument that my friend was making was that it's external to you. You know, just another one of these crazy like new age like word juggling that makes no sense. You know, it might make sense to their very limited realization, but in the grand scheme of things, no. You're just completely missing the point, missing the plot. And even the Vedas themselves say it's not the words of the books which are transcendental and magical, but it's the consciousness of the purified disciple who are studying them, who is able to bring them to life based on your practical application of them, based on your practice, your spiritual discipline, your sadhana, based on philosophical discourse with others, and just understanding the cosmology generally and experiencing it in a deep inner way. You're able to bring life to these scriptures. I really feel very sorry for the New Agers who have decided that they don't need ancient texts. They don't need the ancient wisdom. They don't need the true gnosis. And all they need is to be non-defined, to be non-this, non-that, non-this, non-that. See, I tried to explain it to my friend that Vaishnavas also believe in the type of... He kept trying to push this Brahma Sayuja Mukta on me. He kept trying to say, no, the only realization, the only liberation is merging with Brahman, right? The merging with Brahman, becoming that period. Of course, I explained to him, no, Brahman is just Sat, and you're just seeing the one angle of vision, which is compared to the rays of the sun. There's also the sun globe, and there's also the personality of the sun within the globe. I tried to explain to him, Srimad Bhagavatam 1-2-11, but he just wasn't grasping it because he viewed all these things as separation. He couldn't understand that the Sat was the first level, not the third level. He thinks that the third level is the first level and that they're illusion, and that they become separate and material in the mind. All these qualities are just mental. That's what he's thinking. A lot of these Mayavadis, they can't understand the difference between material diversity and spiritual diversity. So what can you do? I try to explain to him that Vaishnavas also allow for a Brahma Sayuja Mukta. They say, okay, yeah, you can have merger with Brahman. Of course, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I also said, says that merger with Brahman is not even compared to a drop in the ocean of bliss, which comes from service to Para Brahman, Sri Krishna, to Bhagwan. The servile relationship in love to Sri Bhagavan is infinitely times greater than the experience which you can have from merging into Brahman. And not only that, but I tried to explain to him that you're actually merging, you're actually becoming liberated, quote unquote, from a negative perspective. You're seeing neti, it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. So you're still attached to the material. And that's why there's no such thing as Brahman liberation, because you come back, because you're still attached to the material. So you agitate for desires and you come back down. There's no such thing as desirelessness. So the idea that perfect desire in action and service is the path negates this whole idea that separation and diversity is all mental, because this is transcendental truth. Anyway, the people who have not studied the books, they might get a little bit of this realization from somebody or another, and then mistakenly somehow think that it's become their own. Do some meditating on it and whatever. And because it's such a dangerous stage, the ego will fight for its life. The pride, the false ego, the ahamkara will fight for its life. And it will try to shore up its realization in a kind of prideful way. Like not needing others, not needing this, not needing that. It's very, what's the word I want? Cynical. And it's a very cynical type of mentality. And it doesn't get you very far. You're hating on this person's book, you're hating on this person's philosophy because it's quote-unquote external. It's not external to them, it's not external to the person who wrote it, who put it into the book. And when you read it, it doesn't become external, it becomes internal. The external is only a vehicle for the internal. So all the people who are saying books are external or I'm external and you don't need teachings from me or from books or anybody, you're completely deluding yourselves. It's just a little hangover remnant of the pride in your false ego asserting itself and trying to take over the whole process. There is a tremendous wisdom that you can gain from the ancients who have left us these traditions, whether it be Hinduism, Christianity, Gnosticism, which came out of Judaism, whether it be whatever, paganism, a little bit less of a tradition there. Look for a religion or a spiritual, practice that's had a consistent guru-disciple relationship. Even the Christian and Gnostic, they've had this apostle-disciple relationship, not as deep as the Hindus or someone like this, but they still have it. So if you look for a spiritual tradition that has a relationship like this, a guru-disciple, then you can know that the wisdom is a science. It's not guesswork like these New Agers that you guys love so much, who are just pulling shit out of their ass and have no realization. This is a science. A science. Time-tested, okay? Trial and error hardened in the fires of scientific method. At least this is what I see of any of the lineage traditions, whether it be Christianity, Islam, or Sikhism, Hinduism, whatever, Buddhism, whatever it be. These people are holding on to a time-tested science which has been proven since ancient times to be true. And tell me again why it is that you have no interest in this. Tell me again why it is that you don't want to hear these people's story. Oh, it's just pretty much because your false ego is asserting its pridefulness and wanting to remain ignorant. That's pretty much it. It's wanting to remain in the ass-like condition that it's in. There's no other reason. Because if you actually understood what's in these scriptures, and I know that it might be hard to decipher especially some of the more deeper scriptures. That's why it requires a lot of work. It requires you to sit down and study often. For me, I study constantly. I have so many books in my room, and I'm always researching new stuff. And this is not something which I have to force myself to do. I'm just fascinated to integrate all of this wisdom. I think people have the wrong impression that somehow you are like losing a piece of yourself if you take information from this book or from this other source. That couldn't be more far from the truth. Rather, you're gaining more pieces of yourself and you're losing a piece of yourself if you deny it. You're gaining more of yourself by the more wisdom that you can integrate into your intelligence. I'm not telling you to go out and to just copy-paste everything into your mind. I'm saying you should meditate on these texts. Meditate on them so that the words become transcendental experiences. Then a sacred text becomes a portal to the spiritual dimension. And the more you develop your affinity to the spiritual dimension through these portals, which are the Guru and the Shastra, in Vaishnav philosophy, they say that the only authority comes from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. In other words, from the enlightened master, from the enlightened saint, and from the Shastra, the authorized scriptures, which have been, passed to us from the holy people and the holy teachers. Whether you study from a Guru, from a Sadhu, or from Shastra, either way you're forming an affinity with a portal to the spiritual plane, to the absolute realm. And the more you form this affinity, the more of the negative material parts of yourself are burned off. And the more that you let go of them, you say, I don't need this part, I don't need this part, I don't need this part, I don't need this part. And a great catharsis, because you're able to actually realize who you are. You're able to actually see yourself. You're able to actually see the truth. Whereas before you're just groping around in darkness with your material consciousness. So anything which is of the actual absolute plane, that is what you should be attracted to. You know, 99% of the New Age stuff is not on that plane. 99%, there's certain small things which are, like A Course in Miracles, I'll give into that a lot of that is on the absolute plane. Some other things, but most of the New Age stuff is not. They're just on a very low mental plane with maybe a little bit of spiritualization going on, but mostly on the mental plane. And that's all that you'll ever get, is to that level. So, you know, the reason that these New Agers are attacking books and gurus and whatnot is because actually they're envious and frustrated that they can't reach to that level. Because, you know, whatever, they're too lazy or just not willing to have the humility to learn from a higher authority and would just prefer to assert themselves as God, which is so very common. Do you see what a hole we're dug in? And these people want to hate on gurus and scriptures? This is just out and out demoniac. Another thing, in response to the previous video which I made about my friend and his kind of arrogant demeanor in relation to his realization, I wanted to comment about all the people. Namaste. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guru. Text, who goes around like attacking the wisdom of our first, you know, forefathers in the ancient times? Who goes around disrespecting them in such a way as to say we don't need their books? Their books are the only thing which has preserved a connection between us and antiquity. The antiquity when all the world was one religion, when the sciences of astrology, geometry, you know, geomancy, ritual magic, all of these kind of occult sciences were flourishing. Not only that, this is the people on YouTube in the New Age genre, persuasion, who are trying to tell you that you don't need books. This is such a dangerous concoction. Really, guy? Like, who goes around attacking sacred texts?